Go. So what we're going to talk about today is how to get your diptych set up in InDesign. Now, I know some people like to do take their multiple photographs and put them together in Photoshop or something. There's some very specific reasons why I don't like that and why I like to use InDesign, and I think you're going to see it very, very quickly why we want to use InDesign and what is actually the best for us. You've been in InDesign before. It's a relatively complicated program actually, but we're going to be using it in a very limited and very basic manner just to put two photographs together. But what it allows us to do is very easily rotate, crop, and match images up together in size, which if you were copying and pasting images in Photoshop and then you crop it, it gets a lot messier actually in Photoshop than it does in InDesign. So we're going to use InDesign instead. And if you ever try to put two images side by side in a file in Photoshop someday, I think you'll realize that I'm correct about that. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to click New. You can either click the button, or if that doesn't show up for some reason, you go New and Document. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting these up as 11 by 17s. Your first consideration is whether you want to go vertical or horizontal with your design. Okay, and I'll show you the advantages of both. If you have two vertical photographs, then the most efficient use of space is to make those in a horizontal design. So boom, boom, two verticals, horizontal. So let me show you how that could work. So if I do, I can type in here. Now when you're typing your paper sizes in there, you can go 17, but again, or not again, you must remember to put IN afterwards. If you notice, these oddball numbers here are picas. I think I explained those in class at the beginning when we were doing this. Probably none of you all remember. Picas are an odd measurement. They're actually measured, or picas are one line of 12-point font. That's what one pica is. It's a printing measurement. And so one 12-point line of font is actually, well, let me put it this way. Therefore, when you're printing in 12-point font, 6 lines of 12-point font will cover an inch. So technically, one pica is 1/6 of an inch. That's really odd. But then if you look at it, 66 picas, that's 11 inches. So the previous thing was letter, 66 picas equals 11 inches. That's really strange. Now the cool thing about InDesign is you don't have to stick to picas. Okay? If you just type in IN, it will automatically convert it for you. So I typed 17 IN there, and then my height is going to be 11 IN, which it already was, but that's okay. And you'll notice that it converted the 17 IN to 102 picas. So now I'm going to type in 102 picas, or 17 inches, by 11 inches, and you'll notice that it switches to tabloid. This is really your key here. It's tabloid, and you'll see that the landscape button is selected. And now margins aren't that big of a deal, so I'm just going to turn those off. I like to zero them out for something like this. If you're doing a text document, that's important. You do not need to worry about bleeds and slugs. Okay, bleed is what happens when you're doing full-scale printing or full page printing on a printing press. You actually need to extend the photograph a little bit beyond the edges of the page to make sure that it actually goes corner to corner. We're not going to worry about that here. Our inkjet printers are great at that. We don't need to set a bleed. So you don't even have to click that, and you're just going to click OK. So here is your first document. And you can see if I were just to take to a rectangular frame and I just make a vertical, you can see how two verticals would fit quite nicely here. Really well. If I had two horizontals, this would not work out quite so well. So actually, just take this, rotate it 90 degrees, and I think you can see now automatically, I just don't have the room to do that. And so therefore, what I have to do is I have to shrink my images and make them smaller. And most of the time, you wouldn't want to do that. So two vertical images makes a lot of sense. if you have two horizontals, let's do the opposite here. If you've got two horizontals, so my width this time will be 11 inches and my height will be 17 in. Zero out my margins again. Now I've got this. Let's just borrow this size here. So copy, paste. Now I think you can see, again, the opposite is true here. Two horizontals will make a much better design in the page as opposed to two verticals. That if I had two verticals, actually I don't need this, just start there. If I have two verticals, now I'm going to have a similar problem that I did when I did the other. So the answer here is, depending upon what you do and what you've got, you may want to do, if you've got two verticals, then you want to do a horizontal. If you've got two horizontal photographs, you'll want to do a vertical like this. Now, the next thing that some of you should be asking is, okay, what if I've got one of each? And that is a very good question. And in that case, what seems to work best, and I'm not saying that it's a must, but what seems to work best is you can choose a horizontal or vertical depending upon how well the photographs work together in those orientations, and you can actually switch it up. So if I wanted to take this and change this, let's say, what you can do is, well, actually, that was really confusing. Let me start all over again. If you've got one horizontal and one vertical, you've got a choice. You can try to do something like this, okay, where you bring this up and then you have this one here, and then if they lead into each other really well, then that could work, okay? In the horizontal, it could be the same thing. If you had like a horizontal photograph like this, and you bring your vertical over like that, depending upon how you worked it out, those could work. But the easiest way to deal with your photographs, if you've got one of each, and let's just do a horizontal here, 17 picas is really tiny, 17 inches by 11 inches. You don't want to type in 17 picas, because if 6 picas equals an inch, that's a little bit shy of 3 inches tall, so that would have been really, really small. So don't make that mistake. So now your double check is it says tabloid. Okay, so now I've got another horizontal here. The easiest way to deal with photographs of a different size is actually to do two squares. So take a square, take another square, and you can set it up. Now, these two squares are a little bit too big for the page. Actually, I did that pretty darn well. But if I wanted some space between them, I can highlight them both at the same time, and then I will actually scale them down together using the transform tool, and that keeps them proportionately the same. Just a little bit there. That looks good. And now I can actually move them apart a touch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I hit the over arrow key 5 times this way, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times that way, and then maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. There we go. So now I've got a little bit of space, and now I've got squares. We're going to go with squares for now to do the rest of this demo, but I just wanted you to see that there's a lot of possibilities. The other possibility with squares is maybe you want to go vertical with squares. Fine. One of the cool things that we can do in InDesign is we can actually change our layout. So I can just go to Document Setup under the File menu, and I can just change this from landscape to portrait just as easily as clicking a button. It'll flip it, and now all I've got to do is rearrange my frames that I have for my images. Okay? So that's basically how you're going to start this. You want to start the page, the new document, then you're going to get your frames laid out. The frame tool that you're using is this one here that has an X in it. That seems to be the best one to start with for now. And once you're ready to place your photographs in, now the fun starts. So I'm just going to use some of my photographs. Remember really quickly that InDesign does not import camera raw files, so your files must be Photoshop files instead. So what you're going to do is you're going to select the frame you want for your first photograph, and you're going to go File and Place. So now I'm just going to go to And if you want to see which ones are which, you can open up the preview pane here, and it doesn't matter anyway. I thought it might give me a preview, and it doesn't. So these are shots from Africa. Let's just see what that one's pretty cool. Okay, so this one comes in, and the first thing that's going to happen is you'll notice it comes in way too big. It's always going to do that pretty much. So I can resize it with the little buttons here, or in this case, when we were doing that for our previous assignment, you can click one of these buttons and it fits top to bottom, but now it's got a lot of empty space. And so what I would really probably want to do is fit it to content that way. And now you'll notice that I've cropped off a lot of my photograph to the left and the right, but I can also click in the center here, and I can slide my photograph around in the frame. I can also grab, you can see the blue is the frame of the photograph, but you can see or the frame of the actual frame that I made, the box. But here's the frame of the photograph, so I can actually scale it up. I can rotate it slightly to kind of, put things, like let's say my photograph's a little crooked or whatever. I can adjust it just however I want to. I can slide it around in the frame. This is why I didn't want you to crop anything. Okay, this is why cropping in Camera Raw and then opening it in Photoshop was going to be bad. Because now you've got this infinite ability to crop and position your photographs within the frames. So let's just say we've got that one, and then I'll go here and place another one. And then we've got this. And so then again, here with this photograph, I'm going to resize it. Now, when you resize a photograph, it's really important that you do hold the Shift key down. Because the last thing you want to do is this. Yeah, that really stinks. And you can do it very subtly if you're not careful, to the point where you might not really realize, but you can see that he's been stretched. You know what I mean? I mean, you can see that he's been stretched. So it's really important that you don't do that. Hold the Shift key down when you're resizing your elements, and that will give you a much, 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 much better control of your photograph. So now I've got a really, really difficult decision. I'm working with a diptych here. Here we have, and this is actually kind of nice. Here we've got these boys watching a water well being drilled, and then here we have the final product, which is a water well and some school children using it in Africa. Now, because I'm doing squares, I've got a major problem. And that major problem is that this boy here is getting chopped off, or this boy here is getting chopped off. And I don't have much of a choice. I either chop him out completely. That looks awkward, okay, because you can kind of see his foot coming in here. Or I go this way, and now he's getting chopped off. This is actually a better photograph, I think. But in reality, the whole photograph, the whole horizontal, was a better photograph than this square. So I've got a really difficult decision to make now. I either kind of learn to live with what I've got here, which I'm really honestly not so happy about, or I have to change up my design. And so now I can go back and I could play with, let's see, this is a horizontal and that's a vertical. So I could play with maybe making my frames a different sizes. But when you start doing that, sometimes it just doesn't work. So let's say I'll go back to this one. Yeah, this one here. I like the horizontal for this. So I'm going to go place, and I'm going to put this one back in here like that. Oh, that's interesting. It's rotated. It's kind of weird. Okay, so I'll rotate. So you can rotate the photograph in the box however you want. And there we go. So now I can bring this down, and now I can get pretty much all of my photograph in that frame however I want to. Okay, slide it around. And then this one here, file place. I believe it was this one. Yeah. And now I can do the same thing, scale this down, slide it around in the frame, get as much or as little of the picture as I can. And so now I have to, make a decision. Is this better than this? Do I like the way these two photographs lead into each other because one's a horizontal and one's a vertical? Or do I like the square format better? In a lot of ways, I like the format of the two squares better. but I like my photographs better in their original composition. So now I've got an even greater decision. Do I do what I don't like as much because I like the design, or do I scrap my photographs and try and choose new ones? Or scrap one of them and choose a new one? Maybe I've got another drilling photograph that's a horizontal, and I can move to a design like this. If I've got two horizontals, I might be able to do a vertical design with two horizontals that would look really good. You see what I mean? So it's not an easy process to kind of take your photographs and work them together. However, what's really cool is InDesign allows you to do multiple designs. So so if I take this, one here and I make this the final one, okay, so there's my final photograph. I don't want, I've been rotating the frames, so everything's all messed up here. So this is my final photograph of the water well, okay, and then, I don't know, is this a horizontal? No, it's not a horizontal. Just trying to find a horizontal here. Oh, okay, so here's a horizontal. So now this is the well drillers doing what they call shocking the well, which is where they drop a big heavy post with a special end on it to clean out the mud and the grit and the dirt that's been in the bottom of the well now from the drilling process. So now I've got two horizontals, and so my question to myself has to be, okay, is this a suitable substitute for this photograph? Which one's more important? Do I like this one more or this one more? And how does that affect the meaning of my diptych? You know, if I'm doing a diptych on the idea of the human condition and the need for water and fresh water and what goes into that in poorer areas of the world, well then probably I do want to finish with a water well and children, getting clean water out of it. So then this one becomes really important, and maybe I have better choices or multiple choices for the drilling of water wells. I don't know. It really depends upon the meaning of your photographs, but you're going to have one that you like better, and you're going to have one that's more important. And so you need to kind of decide which one that is, and then see if you can fit another photograph around it. This also may mean that you realize you got to reshoot, if you can, and that's also a possibility. The other option is, if you've got a vertical, let's just say you've got a vertical, but it's good enough in quality, you may be able to crop it into a horizontal. That's, I hesitate to say that. It's not going to work well for this photograph, I don't think, but yeah, it doesn't work well for this photograph at all. But you can take a vertical and you can crop it into a horizontal if you wanted to. You can see here, it's not really working for this photograph really well, because if I go high enough to see the boys here watching the water well drill, you don't really get a good sense of what's happening with the drill and the water that's there and everything like that. I mean, I guess it works, but it's not as good of a shot. It has to be a vertical, So in this case, that didn't work. But in some cases, that might actually work out. Okay, so that's one last option. Essentially, this is why we're using InDesign, because it allows you to be flexible. Now, here's what I also recommend. Look at, I've built now 3 different designs. I'm not going to just chuck them all and save one. I'm going to save them all. So I would go Save As, and I would say Design 1, Design 2, Design 3. And you just put them in the folder with all your images. Just keep them all in there in the same place. And then I'll come around and I can help you decide which one's better or what options to do. But the cool thing about InDesign is it allows you this ability to manipulate your images, crop them, rotate them, place them side by side. You know what else I can do? Let's say I'm not sure about this image either, so what I'll do is I can just take this photograph, this frame, and I'll just Alt-drag, and I'll put a copy over here. Boom. And now I can take this, I'll delete the photograph out of there, and then I'll put in this one. and I'll see what I like better. You know, maybe I like this one better with the images of the school children, you know, doing their you know, pumping the water, you know, and maybe I don't, but at least it allows me, and then I just keep this one off the side, you know, and then if I want to, I just drag it in right over, you know, right over top, and then I can replace them. So again, it allows you the ability, I could load up 5 or 6 different photographs into the same file and just switch them around and move them around and see which ones look better next to each other. Does that make sense? So it allows you to work very quickly, very fluidly, and get a really good sense of what designs would work the best, and really just kind of do that in a more natural manner. Just remember, really 3 big things. Number 1, your images have to be Photoshop files, okay? They can't be camera raw. So you have to have them in Photoshop and editing them, which you should be doing anyway, so it doesn't matter. Number 2, when you're creating your documents, if you're typing in the size, make sure you type 17IN so that InDesign knows that you're trying to do inches instead of picas, because it's defaulting to picas. 17 picas is not even 3 inches, so that would be a huge mistake, okay? And then lastly, when you want to put photographs in, you draw the frames first, and then you go File, Place. Not Open, but Place, to place the photograph in the frame. And one last little tip about that, select the frame first with the black arrow tool at the top there, click on the frame, then go File, Place. And that way it knows where you want to put the photograph. If you forget that, you'll see a little thumbnail of your photograph hovering with the mouse and moving with the mouse. If that happens, then just click on the frame you want it to go into, and it should put it into that frame. But it's easier to select the frame first. Okay? I know that's a lot of information, but at the same time, I think you'll get it. We're using InDesign in a very simple manner in this way, and I think that you'll be just fine. Does this make sense to everybody? Okay.